I want to start today with a feeling I think we all know. That incredibly frustrating feeling when you're with friends, you're trying to pick a restaurant, you're all hungry, you all agree you want, say, Italian food.
Oh, I know this feeling very well.
Right. But 45 minutes later, you are still on the pavement, starving, because for some reason, the group just can't execute the plan. You're not stuck because you disagree, you're just stuck.
It's paralysis by, well, not even analysis, just paralysis.
Exactly. Now, I want you to imagine that same feeling, but, multiply it by 30 years, apply it to billions of pounds, and have it affect the lives of millions of vulnerable people. That is the mystery we are unpacking today.
It sounds like a conspiracy when you put it like that.
Yeah.
A secret plot to just do nothing.
It does, but it's actually something much more mundane and, frankly, more revealing about how our political systems work. Today, we're doing a deep dive into social care reform in the UK.
And I think it's important to say right at the top, this isn't just about policy details and bureaucratic plumbing.
No, absolutely not.
We're looking at a source called the social care paradox, repeated diagnosis without follow-through. And it's really a case study in why our political systems can be so bad at finishing what they start. It's about that gap between knowing the answer and actually doing something about it.
And the stakes here are so high because social care can sound a bit, abstract, but it affects, or it will affect, pretty much everyone listening.
Without a doubt, we're not talking about paperwork here. We're talking about older people stuck in hospital beds because there's no safe place for them to be discharged to. We're talking about disabled adults who are fighting for an independent life.
And all the unpaid carers.
Millions of them, usually family members who are just physically and financially exhausted. It's a huge, huge issue, but it's stuck in this bizarre loop.
So let's get into the messiness of it, because the source makes this great point early on that one of the reasons it's so hard to solve is that social care isn't just one thing.
It's not. The source calls it an awkward problem for the way government is structured.
What makes it awkward?
Well, governments love neat boxes,
Yeah.
right? Silos. The Department for Education does schools, the Ministry of Defense does the Army, but social care, it's kind of homeless. It doesn't sit in one neat department.
It's tangled up in everything.
Exactly. It's part health, so it's tangled up with the NHS. It's part housing. It's the benefit system. It's local government finance, which is a huge part of it. It's even immigration policy when you think about the workforce.
So there isn't one minister who can just, sign a check and fix it.
Precisely. No single budget line, no single owner. And political systems, they hate that. They want clarity, they want ownership, and they want quick wins. Cut a ribbon, announce a new thing, see results before the next election.
And social care is the opposite of a quick win, isn't it?
It's the ultimate slow burn. You're asking a prime minister to spend huge amounts of money and political capital now for a benefit that might not be seen for 10 years. That's a very, very hard sell.
So because it's awkward and slow, you'd think the system would just ignore it, just, pretend it doesn't exist. But that's the paradox, right? It hasn't been ignored.
No, quite the opposite. And that's what's so strange. If it were just too hard, you'd expect silence. Instead, we've had this constant noise, this constant attention for decades.
It just keeps coming back.
Again and again and again.
Yeah.
A zombie problem, as you said. It refuses to die, but it also refuses to be solved.
I really want to walk through the timeline on this because reading the list in the source material, it's jaw-dropping. It's a Groundhog Day of reviews.
It is. You have to see the dates to really feel the frustration.
So where do we start?
Well, the modern era of this problem really kicks off with the Royal Commission on Long-Term Care. That was 1999.
1999. I mean, we were still using dial-up modems. That's how long ago that was.
Exactly. That was under a Labour government. Then, fast forward a bit, you get the Wanless Review in 2006.
Still Labour.
Still Labour. Another big, detailed report. Then in 2009, a white paper, Shaping the Future of Care Together. Then, of course, the government changes. You get the coalition.
Right, so you'd expect them to just throw out all the old plans.
And they do, but what do instead? They launched their own massive investigation, the Dilnot Commission, in 2011.
I remember Dilnot. That felt like a really big deal at the time. Everyone was talking about that cap on care costs. It felt like a breakthrough.
It really did. And it even led to an act of parliament, the CARE Act of 2014. But, and this is the crucial bit, the key funding parts of it were delayed, and then they were just shelved.
So it never happened.
Not really. And then you have the House of Lords looking at it in 2019. And that's not to mention all the green papers, white papers, and spending reviews in between.
It's exhausting just listening to the list.
It is. And the key thing here is that it spans the whole political spectrum. Labor, conservative, coalition. This isn't one party's failure. It's a systemic failure. Every type of government we've had has looked at this, commissioned a report, and then essentially blinked.
And the source makes this really uncomfortable point that the work in these reports was actually good.
That's the real tragedy. The analysis is strong. The evidence is all there. We are not waiting for some genius to invent a solution. The answers are sitting in filing cabinets, gathering dust, from back when the Spice Girls were at #1.
So if we have the answers, why are we still here? I think the logical assumption most people would make is that there must be this huge fundamental disagreement about what to do.
Right, a massive ideological fight.
Exactly. The state should pay for everything versus individuals should pay, and they just can't agree.
But the source gives us a major reality check on that disagreement.
Right.
It's largely a myth.
Really?
When you actually read the core findings of all those reports from 1999 right through to today, they're not really at odds. They're all more or less singing from the same hymn sheet.
Okay, so what is this consensus then? What did they all agree on?
There are about 5 or 6 key things. First, the money. Every single review concludes the system is chronically underfunded for the demands being placed on it.
Okay, point 1, more cash is needed. No surprise there.
Point 2, the postcode lottery. They all agree it's just fundamentally unfair that the care you get depends on your local council's budget. That has to stop.
Right.
Then there's the workforce. Every report says the pay is too low, the conditions are poor, and staff retention is a disaster. You can't run a compassionate system on burnout.
And the clash with the NHS, that always feels like the biggest sticking point.
It is, and they all see it. They all agree it's madness to have healthcare free at the point of use. But social care is means-tested. When the same frail elderly person needs both, it's totally dysfunctional.
And the big one for individuals, the fear of losing your house.
Yes, the fear of catastrophic costs.
Yeah.
Every review agrees we need some kind of pooling of risk, a cap on costs, to take that terror away from people.
So wait, they agree on the funding gap, the postcode lottery, the workforce crisis, the NHS split, and the need for a cap on costs.
Correct.
That sounds like a solution. So the verdict is an unresolved disagreement?
No. The verdict is repeated agreement, followed by a total failure of nerve. They all agree on what to do, they look at the price tag, and they freeze.
Which brings us to what I found the most fascinating bit of this. If they agree, but they're too scared to act, why keep launching new reviews? Why not just be honest and say, we're not doing this?
Because saying we're not doing this is politically impossible. But actually doing it means raising taxes, which is also seen as impossible. So you pick door number 3.
The review.
The review. The source calls this the psychology of restarting. And it's politically very useful. You stand up and say, we take this incredibly seriously, so we're launching a new commission.
It sounds proactive, doesn't it?
It sounds great. And crucially, it buys you time. It creates, a 2-year space where anytime a journalist asks, you can just say, we're waiting for the report.
But there's a cost to that, isn't there? The source says this constant restarting actually does damage.
A huge cost. A cost the system pays, not the politicians. First, just think of the wasted time. Every new review has to spend months just getting up to speed, relearning what the last review already found out.
Reinventing the wheel.
Over and over. Then you have to rebuild all the relationships with charities, with care providers, with local councils. They all have to troop back to Westminster and explain the basics to a new set of faces.
And I imagine they get pretty cynical after the 5th or 6th time.
Incredibly. Institutional memory is just wiped clean.
Yeah.
But the biggest cost is the culture it creates.
What do you mean by that?
The source puts it brilliantly. It says, restarting starts to feel safer than finishing. Think about it. If you finish a reform, you own it.
Yeah.
You own the tax rises, you own the complaints. But if you're just reviewing it, you're safe.
Yeah, that's profound. It's the safety of the drawing board. As long as you're still in the planning stage, no one can criticize the finished building.
Exactly. But now think what that feels like from the outside. If you're listening to this and you're trying to find care for your mom, how does that constant restarting feel?
It must feel like a total betrayal.
It feels like drift. You see all this activity, speeches, announcements, new papers, but nothing actually changes on the ground. It looks like movement, but there's no progress.
It's like a builder who keeps coming around to measure your windows, but never ever fits the glass.
That's a perfect analogy. And after a while, you just stop believing the glass is ever coming. You just accept you're going to be cold.
So this brings us to the final, bigger picture, the systemic implications, because the source argues this isn't just a sad story about social care, is it?
No, not at all. Social care is just the most painful and obvious example of a much wider flaw in how our government works.
The canary in the coal mine.
Precisely. It shows us what happens when you have a long-term problem that runs straight into a short-term political horizon. You have this shared responsibility, health, local government, but accountability is so thin that effectively no one is really accountable.
And I want to be clear here, because the source is very specific. This isn't about corruption or bad people.
No, and that is such an important point. It's easy to just be cynical and say, oh, they don't care, but the source is clear. This isn't about bad faith. The ministers involved generally do care. The civil servants work incredibly hard.
So it's a design flaw, not a moral flaw.
It's a structural flaw. The system is built to think, to analyze, to debate. What it struggles to do is to stay put.
Stay put.
Yeah, to stay focused on one course of action long enough to see it through. A minister might be in their job for 18 months. A government has a 5-year term, but really only a couple years in the middle for difficult stuff.
And a problem like social care needs a 10 or 20-year plan.
At least. It needs a plan that can survive an election. A plan that a new government doesn't just immediately tear up for the sake of it. But our system is basically designed to encourage kicking the can into the long grass. It's always easier to hand the problem to the next person.
It really reframes the whole question. You stop asking, why haven't they fixed social care? And you start asking, is our system even capable of fixing anything this complex?
That is the multi-billion-pound question, isn't it? And it applies to climate change, to infrastructure, to pensions. Social care is just where the failure is most visible because the human cost is so raw and so immediate.
So let's try to wrap this up. We started with this mystery. Everyone agrees on the problem and the solutions, so why does nothing happen?
And the answer, it seems, is that we're stuck in this cycle of endless restarts. We have all the knowledge we need. The issue isn't what to do. The blueprints are all there. The issue is how to stick with the plan.
It's a sobering thought. It means that calling for another review is actually making the problem worse, not better. We don't need another graph. We know.
We know. We don't need more analysis. We need a mechanism for commitment.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought from the source. It's a question that has really stuck with me.
It's a question for all of us, really. The source says we should stop asking if Parliament cares enough about social care. That's the wrong question.
So what's the right one?
The right question is, has Parliament designed itself to be capable of remembering, committing, and finishing the things it already knows how to start? Because until the answer to that is yes, we're just going to keep measuring those windows forever.
A powerful place to leave it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the machinery of government inaction.
My pleasure.
And to you, the listener, thanks for being with us. We'll see you in the next deep dive.